Out of all the mainline Gran Turismo games, the second one has been the only remaining game that I had never played before. With its ridiculous car roster and timeless style like its contemporaries, I really wanted to do a playthrough of it, so I had finally played all 7 main games. But in my pursuit of pushing the series to its limits, I simply couldn't resist immediately challenging myself. But since I had seen very little of GT2, let alone play it, what would be a fun idea that sounds ridiculous but might at least have a slight chance of being doable? Well, after a certain Gran Turismo 4 playthrough by yours truly, one of the cars in that playthrough became quite a phenomenon throughout the racing game community. A tiny sports car from Suzuki, which despite its size, has proven to be a bona fide racing machine throughout the Gran Turismo series. Of course, I am talking about the Suzuki Cappuccino, or as we like to call it now, the Gigachino. And lucky for us, it's also available in Gran Turismo 2. So the plan for this run is simple: complete as many events as possible while using this little racing machine, and ultimately, try to complete the entire game, preferably while still using our beloved K-car from Suzuki. Will I be able to beat the game with it, or will my inexperience with Gran Turismo 2 be my downfall? Let's not waste any more time and find out. First of all, I had to get familiar with Gran Turismo 2. No, not to its graphics, which admittedly look pretty good with all the upscaling and increased frame rate, but rather to the handling. You see, Gran Turismo 2's handling model differs quite a lot from the succeeding games in the franchise, which allows you to approach corners more aggressively, which I like, at the risk of spinning out more easily, which of course I don't like. So the obvious place for me to start is the license center, so that's what I did first, and of course I wanted to get the gold medals for all of the tests. However, when I started with the first test, I did this.
Let's see if I can just keep it out of third gear, because I've never done these tests before. Again, this is my first time playing this game. Guys, I've never played this game before, by the way. I swear, transferable skills.
So yeah, when I said I never played GT2 before, I wasn't particularly good at convincing my audience of it. I instinctively steered before coming to a standstill, as that's something you also do in similar challenges in the other games. And to my surprise, it actually works in GT2 as well. Unfortunately for me though, the tests that came after this were not so simple for me, as I was still not used to the handling model yet. Although the first B license tests are simple, which I think works really well for players of any skill level, they have also made the requirements for the gold medals much tighter than in most other Gran Turismo games, except maybe for Gran Turismo 3. That didn't really stop me from getting gold on all 10 national beat tests in around 30 minutes though, giving me my first license as well as a nice spoon-tuned S2000. Since I now got a vague idea on how the game's handling worked, it was time to buy the Cappuccino? Well, interesting naming schemes aside, I had first taken the S2000 for a spin as I needed just a few more credits to purchase it. After a quick victory and enjoying what little time I would have with the S2000, I now had enough money to buy my beloved Gigachino, which coincidentally was also available in the correct color. I then also found out about the game's abundance of car descriptions, which is where I found a rather peculiar statement.
It also lets the driver enjoy the thrill of a true front-wheel drive, rear-engine vehicle. Front-wheel drive, rear-engine vehicle. You see the problem? Do you hear the problem?
So with the car obviously being a rear-engined front-wheel drive car, we headed to the K-Car Cup to give it a try, and it became immediately obvious that it's just like in the other games.
There it is. Let's go.
If you thought this car was already way too good in Gran Turismo 4, it will not come as a surprise that it's exactly like that in GT2 as well. The low weight makes it child's play to preserve momentum through the corners, as well as having a pretty decent power band peaking right at the engine's redline, which, although being incorrect as it normally revs way higher in real life as well as in GT4, does work in the car's favor. This is where the familiar gameplay loop of Gran Turismo kicks in. Do some races, upgrade the car, win some more, and repeat. Of course, the car's lack of power was going to be a problem in the short term, so in between some close losses and some close wins, I was steadily building up the car over time while we also did some interesting overtakes to get some of those wins.
No, you're not gonna win this? No, 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 no. No, 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 this car still reigns supreme. Oh god, the Boost P6 is coming. Oh god, it's coming. How we get it though? We're just better. Totally fair overtake, by the way. Fair overtake for victory.
Oh, and I also found this very yellow Vitz, which became whatever this is supposed to be. One of the things I would do when building the car was to apply some racing tires, since the game lacks any kind of tire restrictions aside from the rally events. Although I could have immediately purchased some super soft tires, I started out with the racing mediums first, which already resulted in some outright hilarious cornering speeds. There were still some moments where my car's lack of power was going to be an issue though, so I still had to deploy some creative tactics to win some of these events. But what really showed this car's performance was this race at Deep Forest Raceway.
But now imagine if I can actually get up enough speed to just catch him on this corner. Imagine. 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 Come on. Imagine. This car is too good. This car is too good. There is no reason not to pick this car. There is no reason to not pick this car.
So yeah, I spun the car in the penultimate turn, only for the mighty Cappuccino to pull for the final turn with so much more momentum that I stole the victory away from the Mercedes. At this point, I had managed to do every event that required the National B license, so it was time to head back to the license center and obtain the next license. This, however, is when I quickly found out why people often say that Gran Turismo 2 contains some of the most difficult license tests of the entire franchise. Although most of the tests in the A license are about as difficult as those from the B license, some of them are ridiculously difficult to get a gold medal for, and to add insult to injury, the 60 FPS patch I was using actually makes them even more difficult. This became very apparent once I arrived at the infamous Altezza test, where you basically need to make a single perfect turn to get the gold medal. It took me over 20 minutes of trying and a whole bunch of close runs, until I eventually got my chance and beat the time by only 11 thousandths of a second.
There we go. Finally.
After this test, it only took me half the amount of time I took on the test of the Altezza to complete the rest of them, obtaining the A license and allowing me to dominate some more races with the Cappuccino. Before doing this, however, I gave the car some more power upgrades, where I found out that in Gran Turismo 2, the car can have significantly more power than in Gran Turismo 4, reaching close to 200 brake horsepower. This is also when I would get some more customizability for the car, like a racing transmission and suspension. The latter of these then allow me to apply a trick that's exclusive to the first two Gran Turismo games. If you give your car a low front and a high rear right height, also known as rake, the game thinks that you are constantly driving downwards, which gives you a small acceleration boost. It also enabled me to tune the rest of the suspension, making its main strong suit even more powerful. My tuning and overall setup was then immediately going to be put to the test, as it was time for the historic Car Cup race in Rome, an event that is infamous for having a certain cheating Ford in it, so naturally, I had to beat it with the Cappuccino. Now, since the GT40 basically matches our grip levels but has the advantage of having way more power on a track that is already power focused, this was going to be pretty difficult. Since I was also still getting used to the game's handling, I was still making a few mistakes that cost me more runs than I would have liked to. But then, after a few more close attempts had passed, I would finally get an opportunity.
Block them up, nice. Go on, go by. I dare you. Oh, come on. Good turn there, good turn. Oh, the pass on the corner, on this corner of all places. Is good because I'm gonna get a very good run on the next turn here. We have to be blocking. We're gonna have to be blocking. We have to block here, else we're gonna be losing. I'll let him pass. He can get this. Easy. There it is. That was a good fight. That was a really, really good fight. Hard fall, but we got it. Get out of the game. This car is better.
After that hard-fought victory, it was time to do some of the National League races. However, considering it was able to beat the cheater car and these races only feature a range of sports cars, the Cappuccino was able to breeze past these events with relative ease. It was then time to return to the license center to obtain the International C license, where we would encounter the infamous PTSD Camaro. This car is part of two tests. The first one teaches you how to tackle 90-degree turns, which isn't too difficult, but the second one has these tall walls around the track to make it resemble a street circuit with blind corners, while still having the same gold medal time as the previous one, making it much more difficult. One advantage I had though was that it took me a few minutes to get a gold medal on the version without the walls, which gave me plenty of practice to find the right line when the walls are up. This then made it significantly easier to complete it only in a few minutes as well.
Let's go!
So if you struggle here, my advice would be to do IC3 a couple more times to get the feel of the corners, so you can do them more instinctively once the walls are there. Another infamous test is the penultimate one, which involves an Alfa Romeo at Rome's first sector, which is surprisingly similar to the Camaro test I just talked about. Unlike the Camaro test, however, this one took me over 10 minutes to complete, as the line you have to take is way more precise. After finally getting the run I needed on this, the final test is a lot easier, obtaining all gold medals on the third license and opening up another new set of events. I then immediately headed back to the historic car cup to challenge the cheater car once again, although it's actually not cheating this time. And since this race is at Grindelwald, which is a much twistier track than Rome, I managed to handsomely beat the GT40 as well as a surprisingly quick Shelby Daytona. Another thing I need to mention is with regards to the amount of special events I had done so far. For Gran Turismo 2, Polyphony Digital didn't really bother with most of the vehicle type restrictions, or more plausibly, they just couldn't finish them in time. So a lot of the events are basically open to any type of car, with the exception of drivetrain and aspiration related events. However, most of them do have a power limit, but considering our pocket rocket only has 187 brake horsepower, we basically never had to worry about this. I also wanted to try the Cappuccino in some rally events, but since I was playing at 60 FPS, the opponent replays used for these events are unfortunately broken. That didn't stop me from having some fun hopping around the game's rally courses though, which are actually pretty nice, especially since plenty of them also reappeared in later games. Going back to the tarmac, the Cappuccino continued to dominate throughout the game's range of special events. Whether it will be on Super Speedway against sports wagons or versus GT cars at Red Rock Valley, I could still push the car over the limit, make it spin around to give my opponent some false hope, only for them to be crushed anyway thanks to the superior handling characteristics and surprisingly good acceleration, thanks to a good power to weight ratio and a well optimized tune. But just when I thought I was already quick enough, I was introduced to what is probably now my favorite feature of the first two Gran Turismo games: racing modifications. If you've only played the 6th and 8th gen Gran Turismo games, you might not be familiar with the concept, but exactly as the name says, some cars in Gran Turismo 2 can be modified to become full racing machines. This not only gives the car a racing livery and sheds even more weight from it, it also allows you to increase and adjust the car's downforce thanks to a new racing body kit. There's actually a ton of cars in GT2 that can have one, and the Cappuccino was certainly not left out, with it even being available in 6 different color variants. So with all other upgrades installed, this was the logical final step towards building our little track toy. After making a poll for what the livery choice was going to be, which became this really nice black and blue color scheme, the Cappuccino went on to become the Ultrachino. And to demonstrate the car's performance, I think it's about time I let the gameplay do the talking here. After experiencing to what I can only describe as the Cappuccino's final form, especially considering I had also purchased the super soft tires around this point in the playthrough, I was looking for some proper competition. In the meantime, I had also obtained the International B license, but since none of the tests are particularly difficult, I completed it in about 20 minutes. After which I went on to dominate the European and Pacific leagues, where the Skylines and Vipers were no match against the almighty Suzuki Cappuccino. After looking around for some more challenging events, I found the Super Touring Championship, which puts you up against some touring car legends from the 90s. However, despite it looking like a challenging event, it actually turned out to be even easier than the Euro-Pacific Leagues. We literally had a lead of over 10 seconds in a free lap race, so this wasn't going to be the challenge I had hoped for as well. That was until I found the GT300 Championship, a 5-race event against some of Japan's finest touring cars. Now, with the insane amount of confidence I had after basically dominating everything my car participated in, I jumped into the first race at Grand Valley East, thinking I would just be able to outmaneuver my opponents and claim another decisive victory. But instead, this turned out to be a nightmare of a championship for me. This event exposed two major problems now that I had started racing with and against race cars. First off, the power levels. Contrary to what the game says, the GT300 cars in Gran Turismo 2 actually have way more horsepower than they actually did in reality, with most having well over 400 horsepower instead of 300 like the name of the car class. Made even worse by the fact that these races, unlike most others, have a rolling start instead of a standing start, making it even more difficult to gain some positions at the start of the race. But the second problem turned out to be much worse, and is known as aero wash, or dirty air for the F1 fans watching. In case you don't know, when you're behind another car, in particular one that generates a high amount of downforce, the turbulent air from the driver in front of you will reduce the amount of downforce that the chasing driver will experience. This effect is really noticeable in Gran Turismo 2, from opponents going off the track in groups to your own car suddenly gaining boatloads of understeer. This is the true reason what made these races so much more difficult for me, and the first race at Grand Valley East certainly did not help our cause either. After a decent start, the track's long back straight and abundance of slow turns made it impossible for me to keep up with the leading pack, so I had to settle for third place here, even when I had to quite literally pretend my car was 3 times as wide as I was a sitting duck on the main straight. Luckily, the next race would take place at Laguna Seca, a track with a lot more mid and high speed turns, which is where my car excels at. Although one car got away into the lead and basically turned on Max Verstappen mode by being impossible to catch up to, the rest of the opponents were quite beatable, so a second place finish was definitely more than enough for now, although one of the Silvias in this event was now 4 points ahead in the standings. Our luck then continued as the third race took place at Deep Forest, a track that is very well suited for a lightweight racing machine. Also, because the AI takes a very slow line through the first turn, it allowed me to do some pretty funny dive bomb attempts. But there was still a problem. The Silvia that was ahead of me in the standings was still way too fast, so I had to do some intervention to improve my chances of winning the championship. This then made me start the final lap in third place, leading to a really cool battle in a race that I could not afford to lose.
I'm right on a still now, that's good enough, I think. Look at this, now we have Slipstream, nice. Let's give it a run, let's give it a run. Okay, we snatch it up fast, come on. Get the speed, get the speed. There we go.
With an absolutely ridiculous speed through the final turn, we were immediately back into the championship fight, now with a 2-point lead over the Silvia. But the hardest race was yet to come at Midfield Raceway, as it features a very long start-finish straight with a steep uphill approach, something that will be my Achilles heel when coming into this race. Funnily enough though, the aero wash now worked in my favor as the AI is prone to overshooting a couple of corners here, giving me some great opportunities to make up some positions in the track's middle sectors. And so, although there was one opponent that just flew off into the distance, second place suddenly became a real possibility, and after eventually getting this insane moment where the AI basically just started to follow me like a bunch of ducklings, a second place finish was secured, leaving us with a 3-point advantage into the final race of the championship, which took place at Apricot Hill. Thanks to the track's twisty nature and AI's apparent lack of properly navigating through it, this race turned out to be just like the one I did at Deep Forest Raceway. All of the time I would lose on the straights would be immediately reclaimed once I went through the track's first sector, which by the way looks and feels a lot like a skewed and mirrored version of Suzuka. Then so, after a bunch of skill issues, restarts and outright silly moments from the AI, I managed to win a second race in the championship, which made me the GT300 champion with 7 points to spare, which was definitely the best achievement with the Cappuccino so far. After all of those races, it was time to obtain one more license. And yes, I know that the S license is technically also available, but since you don't need it for any events and I was definitely not going to use the cars from it in this playthrough in the near future, I skipped that one for now. The International A license that I did instead was actually quite fun, with the game's rendition of the Radion Eau Rouge complex proving to be really helpful in teaching you how to tackle elevation changes while cornering. And after about 30 minutes, I had received the final license that I needed to complete the game, which I then used to win all the remaining events that the Cappuccino could participate in, like the Muscle Car Cup. I also finally did the Sunday Cup now because I had completely ignored it up until this point, and it was a nice change of pace from the GT300 Championship, with it unsurprisingly taking very little effort to win. But after all of these victories and as good as the Cappuccino may be, it is unfortunately unable to win the World Championship, as most opponents will at least have 3 times the amount of power, something that even with infinite amounts of grip will be impossible to overcome. It's also turbocharged and rear-wheel drive, despite the game's attempt at telling you otherwise, so we also needed some more cars for the other drivetrain and aspiration specific events. The first of which came in the form of a Daihatsu Soria X4, or Sirion for non-Japanese markets, which shares a lot of similarities with our Cappuccino. A low weight, tiny but powerful engine and great handling characteristics made this an excellent choice to tackle the 4-wheel drive cup. The combination of the drivetrain with a very low weight also allowed me to give it a very short burst gear, which caused the Storia to be catapulted off the line, allowing it to do a 0 to 100 as fast as a modern Volkswagen Golf R. It therefore handsomely defeated some all-wheel drive legends like Skylands and Evos, completing the all-wheel drive challenge with flying colors. Next up is the MR Cup, for which I have obtained another K car, the Mazda Autozam AZ1 A-Spec, which comes with a neat little body kit by default. Although this certainly wasn't as fast as the 2 other cars I have mainly used so far, it was still more than enough to power ourselves through the events, even having another great race against the cheater car, although once again, its participation is legitimate here. This then only left us with the front-wheel drive cup, and if you remember some of the cars we had encountered at the start of this run, there was only one real choice here, a fluorescent yellow Toyota Vitz. Now, considering this is once again a small lightweight car with under 200 horsepower, it didn't take long to transition to this car and complete yet another event with relative ease. But none of the cars we've just tried will stand a chance in the World Championship, so the next car I gave a try was a Toyota Hachiroku, or 86 in plain English, which looked promising at first by reaching well over 250 horsepower when maxed out. And since it comes naturally aspirated by default, I could conveniently bring it to the naturally aspirated tuned car cup. Although a couple of spoon-tuned Hondas and a random Peugeot 306 rally car turned out to be some strong opponents, it was nothing that the Toyota couldn't handle so far. This was even more promising when considering the fact that I hadn't even applied the racing modification yet. So after going back to the shop and choosing this shade of yellow that is much nicer on the eyes than the Vitz from earlier, I entered it for another run in the GT300 Championship, hoping it will be easier this time. However, the game had something else in mind.
Oh my god, I'm getting swarmed. Dude, that Subaru is actually on a freaking roll. It's actually insane. He's catching me quickly though, like holy crap. That Subaru is actually on a mission. Yeah, I don't think we're gonna win this, because look at this, the Subaru's already on our asses, and look how quick he is.
It turned out that this Subaru Impreza that showed up was an absolute monster, but this left me rather confused as the other cars were surprisingly quite beatable, and considering the performance levels between the GT300 should be roughly equal, it didn't really make much sense why one car was so much faster than the others. Although the first few races were not so bad, it was at midfield raceway that it became clear that there was something strange going on with that Impreza, which for the first time in this playthrough caused some real frustration for me.
I'm giving it to, look at it, I gave the toe to the, yeah, look at this. Like, what's the point, man? Like, he literally, look how quick he is. Like, what's the point, man? I'm giving the draft to the other guy. Look at this. He's like straight up like 30 kilometers per hour quicker. There you go, that's what you deserve. Look at the Subaru!
This trend then continued towards the final race, because even though I had tried my absolute best to get it down into last place, it quickly steamrolled its way back up the field as if it was a GT500 car instead. Although I had barely won the championship again, but only after many restarts, I immediately checked the power figures of the Subaru and compared it to the rest, only to find out it was one of the weakest cars out of the entire roster. It has less! It has less! What?
the actual hell is this game?
So there was surely something fishy going on here, and as soon as I watched the replays, it became very clear what it was.
It has more momentum here. It goes out of the slipstream, completely out of the slipstream, by the way. You saw how much quicker he was on the straight. He was accelerating more. Goes again, fully out of the slipstream. Now look at this. After right next to him. After right next to him. He's just gone. He is just completely gone. Like, look at this. It just goes like. It's just like just chilling like this, like no, I think at third place, nice race, nice finish, and then right there it's like, yay! Like, what is this? What is this, man?
Now, Gran Turismo 2 has its fair share of rubber banding issues, and this was probably one of the most blatant examples I have seen. Although factors like drag could have played a role here, which I highly doubt as the Subaru most definitely isn't as aerodynamically efficient as something like the FTO it gapped so easily, it was capable of passing the other cars purely on power, despite having no slipstream and no actual power advantage, as well as having some unreal cornering abilities on some occasions. However, rubber banding or not, the event made one thing very clear. The Hachiroku was unfortunately also not fast enough to finish the game with, so I still needed a car that's fast enough to win the final events. And after some thinking, I had found a new challenger, the Nissan Pulsar GTI-R, a 4-wheel drive monster of a hatchback, coming with well over 200 brake horsepower from the factory. But when I took it to the tuning shop, it was the upgrades that really showed that this may have finally been the car that we needed.
We're eating good, boys, we're eating good. 364, 390 horsepower. Okay, we're eating good. We're eating good with this car.
So to say that I was excited after seeing those numbers will be a big understatement. After giving it well over 400 horsepower while weighing just under 1100 kilograms, I had given it a slight tune-up and tested this thing out, where I found out that this was truly something special.
Look at that launch. 3.5 seconds to 100 kilometers per hour. Oh, this thing is rapid.
The effortlessness of going through corners no matter how much you threw it around them, combined with the complete lack of oversteer, made it child's play to win with the only limiting factor being the 5-speed gearbox and slight understeer tendencies. And this was even without the racing modification because of course it has the option for one, with the livery being based on the real-life rally car equivalent. But I ain't rallying this one just yet, this one's going straight to the tarmac first because it was time to see if it can beat the Gran Turismo World Championship. But I didn't just want to win, I wanted to beat the Toyota GT1, one of the fastest cars you can encounter here and by extension the entire game. And so after a few tweaks to the car setup and a few rerolls, a suitable lineup had been found, with the main opponents being the aforementioned GT1 as well as a Nissan R390 race car. The other opponents consisted of various touring cars, but were obviously no match for the two Le Mans monsters I was going to take on in this event, which kicked off at Trial Mountain, a fast-paced track with a bunch of high-speed sections. Surely this kind of layout will already make it difficult for us, right? Well, remember about a minute ago when I said that this car was something special? Well, if it wasn't clear enough before this event, these first few laps should definitely get rid of any of those doubts.
We're fighting in a Pulsar with a GT1, which is just stupid. Oh, they're slow for the chicane. Beat chicane. Look at that. We're faster in this section. Come on! Come on! Oh, this is so much fun. Come on, get the GTR as well. Oh, this is so much fun. Come on, come on. Keep the inside. Oh, this is so much fun!
The Pulsar was completely unstoppable. After only 1.5 laps of racing, it had already destroyed both the GT1 and R390, after which I could truly unleash the car's full potential. The car's great power output combined with the unreal amount of stability it provided, allowed me to practically eat the curves for breakfast and continue without breaking a sweat. After cruising towards a decisive victory, it looked like it was going to be smooth sailing as the next track was Laguna Seca, where our cars did extremely well in the past. However, this is where I got a harsh reality check from the GT1, as the Pulsar stood absolutely no chance on the straights, and despite my best efforts and track extensions once I found out that the AI literally does this too, there was simply no way to properly keep up, especially since the R390 was already quite difficult to deal with, as it put up an impressive charge towards the end of the race. However, with 3 races to go and being level on points with the GT1, it was still all to play for, and the next race at Apricot Hill was our perfect opportunity to strike back. Just like the GT300 championship that I did earlier, the AI still seems to struggle getting around this track with high downforce cars, while the little Pulsar was soaring through them without any issues. This made it ridiculously easy to compensate for the lack of straight line speed, giving me a comfortable lead which I kept until the end of the race, finishing the 3rd race with a 2nd win and putting me right back into the lead of the championship. But this lead wasn't enough just yet. If I wanted to have a decent chance of winning the championship, and considering the GT1 was now our only real opponent from this point on, I needed to win at least one of the next 2 races. And with the next race being in Rome, it was definitely not going to be easy. Despite the fact that I was able to get much faster runs in Sector 2 and taking much better lines overall, the 2 big straights proved to be a huge issue for me. Since the GT1 has a massive power advantage by having over 300 more horsepower than the Pulsar, I had to compensate for that by getting a much faster run in the turns leading up to the main straights, and hope that it's enough to stay ahead. And even then I sometimes had to do some blocking to keep the position. But after multiple failed attempts, a chance for victory was finally up for grabs.
One more time perfect for this turn. I choked it. I choked it. We have to defend hard now. Get out of the way, no! Come on. Don't lose at the end. I choked this line as well. We got it. That was stressful at the end. Oh my, I was choking hard. Oh god.
After nearly throwing it away in the closing stages, I managed to narrowly claim my 3rd and most important victory in the championship, as this gave me a 4-point lead in the championship with only 1 more race to go, which meant that all I needed to do now was to finish at most 1 position behind the GT1. However, this would coincidentally be the hardest race of them all at Midfield Raceway, a track that I had struggled at in the past due to its long uphill straight. But with the car now being fully dialed in and my confidence in the car being at an all-time high, it was time to head to the starting grid for one last time in the championship. Our car's great launch speed proved to be vital to stick with both of the Le Mans legends, which was then helped by the GT1's mistake in the first corner, allowing for a cheeky pass in the first lap. However, with the R390 in front and being seemingly impossible to catch, I had to do everything in my power to keep battling the GT1 and prevent it from breaking away, as I could easily catch the R390 and destroy any chances I had left to win the championship. This then led to a race-long battle, where I had to squeeze everything out of the car through the corners while also making sure that I would not be affected by aero wash if I had to repass the GT1. And as the lap counter ticked down, the chances of the ultimate prize coming our way would only get better and better.
Oh wow, he juked me so hard. Okay, that's a good move from the AI. I have to admit. Come on, keep the speed up, keep the speed up. Nice. I'm actually driving my fucking ass off. Come on. Man, I love the pass. I love the pass. Is it enough for a win, though? It's enough for a win. If it's enough for a win, I'll take it. It's enough. It's exactly 2 points enough. It was a valiant effort. We still win the championship. Despite the GT1 absolutely schooling me in what I can only describe as either an incredibly smart or lucky move from the AI, we've managed to fulfill our goal in sticking with the GT1. And with only 2 of the 4 points lost and our total championship count of 34 points, we will become the Gran Turismo 2 World Champion. And there it is. There it is! There it is, GG! However, the run wasn't over just yet. The special events still had some gaps in them, but since I didn't even race with any proper race car yet, I decided to do some of the all-star races with the cars I've obtained along the way. From the R390 to, this thing? After all of the racing I had done in cars with less downforce and power than the rest, being able to finally use these top-of-the-line race cars I was constantly battling with made it feel like a completely new game, with much higher speeds and downforce levels, something which I was totally not used to up until this point. I also did the test course race in the 180SX Dragster, which was pretty fast. This then left me with one more event to go, the GT500 Championship, and for this it was time to bring the Pulsar out for one more run, where I proceeded to dominate right from the start. In fact, when you consider the fact that, once again, Polyphony gave the GT500s way more power than they should have, it actually turned out to be pretty easy, once again thanks to the car's extreme levels of stability at any speed. However, the championship's second race was at Super Speedway, at which I expected to get completely destroyed, but this turbocharged hatchback made it look like it came straight from the Indy 500. Why are we catching them? Okay, this is cursed, this is cursed. We're actually in the lead. There's no way. This is just dumb. Like, this is literally just dumb. I think you can see how the story goes for the rest of the championship. All of the 3 remaining races led to a convincing victory for the Pulsar, and in the final race at Apricot Hill, I managed to dish out a finishing move to each and every opponent in only a single sector. Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god, we just wiped them in like a single sector. We just wiped them in a single sector. And so, after winning every single race in convincing fashion, the GT500 Championship was ours. And with that, every single GT League and special event race had been completed. And to celebrate the car's success, it was time for one more race down the Pikes Peak mountain, finally using this rally-turned race car for what it was actually meant to be doing. Looking back, this first challenge playthrough, or playthrough in general of GT2, made me appreciate even more just how interesting these older racing games are, especially the ones from the 5th console generation. Having so many cars with such a variety in a game from 1999 still sounds crazy to this day, with many of the more obscure cars never to be seen again in racing games from the succeeding century. I would therefore highly recommend that you give this game a try, even on original hardware. After all, the racing experience will always be there waiting for you, no matter the graphics. But before I properly end this challenge, there's a score I need to settle in the GT300 Championship. That's what you deserve. Oh, you're not gonna get past them. It's just totally necessary. Screw you, Subaru. Nah, I'm the king. And with a one single victory, I'm happy. There you go. Beat up Pulsar. It's a thing now. And with that, I'm out of the championship. It just comes in, destroys you in one race, refuses to elaborate, leaves. Ah, much better. And if that was satisfying for you as well, make sure to like the video and subscribe, as there's plenty like this to come in the future. And make sure to check out my Twitch channel to see what I'll be working on next, and my second YouTube channel for some raw gameplay or random stuff I decided to make. And lastly, you can find a sheet with all my emulation settings in the description below and on my Discord server.
But now it is time for me to look for the next challenge. So I would like to thank you for watching, and as always, have a great day.